Talk. This is your community's podcast with conversations about real estate, local happenings, and all things Winchester, Virginia. I'm Mark Francis, a local realtor, broker, and owner at Icon Real Estate.
And I'm Megan Eanes, a local realtor for 21 years and part of the Icon Real Estate team. Mark and I are so excited to share everything that we love about Winchester, Virginia with you. We want you to be an informed, savvy real estate consumer in today's ever-changing market.
Yep. If you want local knowledge, you've come to the right place. Well, happy November.
Happy November. How was Halloween for you? Did you do anything of the weekend before?
I bought a bunch of candy and then barely gave it out. You know. Yeah. I mean, so then I have to still then give it out to other people so I don't eat it. And I've been trying to eat my way through it.
I saw a recipe today on how to make a cake that you make with old candy. And you take the old candy and then you melt it.
Does it turn into something healthy?
Oh, gosh, no. And then apparently I was reading, I was like, oh my, this is like sugar shock. I think you'd go into, but apparently it was something you can do. Make the cake and take it someplace.
You have all the leftover candy and then just keep eating it.
But they start having cake walks this time, holiday, different things. Make it for a cake walk.
But my kids are older now and they realize if I steal candy. So, I mean, being my youngest now is a senior and, went to a party and stuff. But, it's not like the days of having younger kids where they come home with all their loot and then they hoard it. And then you have to sneak into the room at night to take a little piece or two, Well,
we've always had the rule: no candy in the room, no food upstairs, and several reasons, but because of the dogs and my kids aren't they don't always pick up after themselves that way. The dogs are not eating chocolate. But we actually went camping this past weekend and they do all their Halloween stuff and the kids dress up and then they go from campsite to campsite and the campsites are all decorated and the weather was perfect and it was a lot of fun. And so my daughter has a bunch of candy from that, and that's enough. Whatever, I might just bring it to the office.
Keep it away from me.
Leave it here.
Yep. Well, but now we're into November, and it's Gratitude Month.
It is.
Is that a thing? I know that
it is.
It's out there, social media. People call that. I mean, Thanksgiving is kind of the season you think about, and so it's a whole month.
Yeah, so, and you can do some people do it on a daily basis. They'll post on Facebook for something that they're grateful for every day. So I thought it would be a great idea if we do it, each podcast that comes out in November, you and I will each say something that we're grateful for.
I love it.
So you want to go first?
Okay, fine. I'll go first. I'm grateful for family, and it all stems from the fact my grandmother is now living with us, and so it just makes me realize more and more of the value of family and having a whole generation difference of somebody else living in your house is interesting. I mean, it's great. And so she's just funny because she's just super friendly and nice. But at the same time, we're still acclimating to each other of our own spaces. And she's been living on her own for a while. And so her independence still kicks in sometimes. And she brought so many things from her Florida house in the move that I didn't want to fight with. So literally there were stacks of toilet paper and tissues and toilet and paper towels that she had hoarded under her bed that I didn't realize she had opened these boxes that she brought from Florida and were stashing them under her bed. I'm like, all right, listen, our space is your space. Your stuff is our stuff. Our stuff is your stuff. It's shared. There's no such thing as your toilet paper anymore. It's ours. So it's the whole shared environment. So that was a long-winded what I'm grateful for, but it's family. So yes, having her with me is great.
I would say I'm grateful for my family living so close to us. We've gotten together every single Halloween now since my son's very first one when he was 3 months old. So it's fun having my parents are a mile away. My sister's a quarter of a mile from me. I mean, we all can get together. My brother's, of course, we sold his townhouse. He's in Ashburn, but it's still really not that far. So I'm grateful that my family's close.
Yeah, it's awesome. You're stealing my thunder, right? You already had that planned. I know.
I didn't actually, but I'm I have to add something instead of just saying family.
Answers.
So I will say my family living
Love
close.
It. Yes, that's awesome. Well, November will continue to give you guys what we're grateful for. And in this coming episode, I'm excited to introduce our conversation with our guests who were from Frederick County, the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it's unique to hear how they are an open book. There is nothing to hide. They will tell you everything they know and what's happening in the world of Frederick County zoning and planning and mostly real transportation. So listen to this conversation because it might impact your neighborhood. It might impact your houses, of where you're thinking to buy. And, there's no bad answer of where to buy a house, but just do your due diligence. And it's all out there for you. So listen to our conversation with Wyatt and John from Frederick County Planning and Zoning. Well, here we are with Wyatt Pearson and John Bishop. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. It's so exciting to have you guys here. I'm excited because we're going to get some behind-the-scenes dirt on what's going on in the county. But before we get to that, I just want to hear about you guys and your lives and your families and where you come from and all those good things. So, Wyatt, I'll start with you. What brought you to Winchester?
I actually just moved up like a year and a half ago to take the job with Frederick County Planning Department. Previously, I was the town manager for the town of Strasburg.
Okay.
And moved there after graduating from Virginia Tech. My wife and my 2-year-old son moved in off of Route 7, and I've got another baby girl expected in January.
Nice.
And just glad to be a part of the community and be working for Frederick County.
Yeah. So, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So, Hokies.
Is that good?
It's okay.
It can go either way around here, from what I understand.
I'm not a UVA guy.
Yeah.
I'm a Wake Forest guy, so we don't hate anybody, and nobody hates us. So
that's
it's
true.
okay,
Yeah.
So where were you before Virginia Tech? Like, where did you grow up?
My father was in the Coast Guard, so
Okay.
like every 2 years, a different duty station. But I went to high school in Chesapeake, Hampton Roads area.
Yep. Awesome. John, how about you?
I'm another one who kind of moved all over. I was actually born in New Jersey, spent time in Arkansas, but ultimately ended up in Wisconsin, which is where I graduated high school and got my undergraduate degree. Came down to Virginia to attend VCU for the planning master's program there. Started my career down in Hampton Roads, probably when Wyatt was in high school. And spent some time there. I've been a transportation planner all through that, ever since an internship that happened during graduate school. And I've been in the Valley now for, 17 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's great. Yeah. So give us your job titles, because that's something that I think is also important to note. So tell us what
I'm Director of Planning and Development.
Of Frederick County.
Yes.
Yep.
And I'm the assistant
And
director.
you're the assistant.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's fascinating because you both were pretty much saying that you went to school specifically for this, job that you are currently in, for this, basic employment. And so, tell us how did you get into that? Like, what drew you into this world of making roads and where they go and planning and zoning and all these things? Kind of what fascinated you to this industry?
I'll let John go first because I know mine's not terribly interesting. It's more dumb luck than anything.
Gosh, I don't know that I'm that interesting either. My undergraduate degree was actually in environmental policy, and I went to get my master's. I ended up in an internship that was very transportation focused. I enjoyed the work a lot. So while I'm, my education as a general planner, I've tended in practice to be focused on transportation, and you can see that in my career. But yeah, it was somewhat accidental, I guess.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of jobs out there for folks with an environmental focus, and that's how I ended up going for a graduate degree in more broad planning, and ended up narrowing back down to transportation, which was, obviously that's an intense field in its own way, because particularly in this area, but really nationwide, we are under a lot of transportation challenges. So that's how I ended up doing that.
Got
It's just it worked for me. I think, like many people in life, you just kind of found what you're good at.
You grow into it,
Yeah.
of like what you like to do, what you're good at, and then just keep improving from there. How about
Hopefully
you,
improving,
Wyatt?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, mine was very similar, honestly, and I, specifically at college orientation, I had this intention of doing natural resources management, in the hopes that I'd be able to be outside more. And I remember my father making the comment to me that, well, you're just going to end up being a park ranger, and I'm going to have to support you for the rest of my life because there's no money in natural resources management, which is true to some sense. And then I had somewhat of a fascination with maps and cities to begin with, and so we went to a couple different introductory classes and just selected it as a major and then ran from it with that. So.
Yeah, nice. Well, I want to get into the weeds here, a little bit of like Frederick County, but before we do that, give us a big picture of your impression of the area, of Frederick County, and how it's growing from a state perspective and even like a national perspective. Do you have experiences of interacting with other other locations and townships and counties.
Yeah.
So give us your perspective of just the county and our area of how it falls within your world.
Yeah, Frederick County as a whole is growing per capita faster than most of the Commonwealth right now. And that's namely from a residential perspective.
Uh-huh.
And so when I say per capita, people look at Northern Virginia proper and the DC metro area and like, well, that's not possible that we're growing faster than them. But on a per unit basis, we actually are. And a lot of that is because of a lot of housing approvals that occurred more than a decade ago prior to the big recession that occurred in 2008, 2009. So there's a lot of approved housing on the books that's now taking off with the market as you know it. That was incredibly hot until like last month where things started to change again.
Yep.
And so from my perspective, Frederick County is well positioned in that way. And that, only having been here a year and a half and kind of still getting my feet wet in the community as a whole, it's interesting to see, there's always a dichotomy between the been heres and the come heres, and Frederick County definitely has that to some extent. Yeah. But most people are welcoming in that respect. So
I like that term, the been heres and the come heres.
Yeah. You're
it's very true in this area.
It's really hard to become a been here. No matter how long you've been here, you're still a come here in most people's eyes.
That's true.
Extent.
Well, John, you said 17 years for you.
And I'm still a come here.
Yeah.
Right. Still don't fit in that category.
I'm fortunate to, know a lot of people in the community, a lot of good friends, but you don't replace folks growing up with each other and going generations back. And I don't even say that as a negative. That's one thing that's frankly attractive to a person like me. I really have a deep appreciation for having roots in it, especially as someone who moved a lot as a young kid. I really do have a deep appreciation for having roots and having those kind of connections, and I wanted that to be the kind of place my family was in.
And it has a small town vibe, and
Absolutely.
we can talk about that all day, because that's really what our podcast Iconic Talk is all about, is really digging into the community, and you guys are experiencing that. And so that's what leads my question of kind of how do you get a sense of this growth, and is that growth something that you guys are trying to look at a slow growth to control it, or are we looking to expand it, become Loudoun County? Where do you predict the county going, especially with the housing market, with the influx of people coming into town? How do we look at that perspective from a county perspective?
I can speak with certainty that nobody in our department will say we want to be anything like Loudoun County.
Okay.
Mostly from
people probably cheering as you're
well,
saying
we
that.
want to continue to be employed here, so we'll be honest in that respect. But no, and slow growth is a common term, but I prefer to reference managed growth because we're not necessarily in a position where we need to tamper down growth to occur at a less rapid level, but we want to manage it effectively and direct it to places that can accommodate that kind of growth. So when we manage growth, we look at the infrastructure capacity that exists, namely John's expertise in our community, and what is the most important infrastructure asset that we are managing right now is transportation. And so a lot of that has been done over decades of good planning work to ensure that where our growth occurs is appropriate and is not going to overextend our existing infrastructure. And we really want to continue that tradition to some extent. So, yeah.
So compare us to some of the other counties. You said you came from Strasburg. You can look around us at Clark County with very limited growth there. You see there's Warren County and Shenandoah County, especially those that are near neighbors here in Virginia. Compare the infrastructure of what you guys are looking to accomplish compared to them. Without trashing other counties, just tell us, give us a little bit about how you guys operate, and do you see similarities or do you see differences in the other counties around us?
I think namely the two you mentioned are far more rural in context and don't have, I hate to refer to Winchester City as a major metropolitan city or anything like that, but comparatively it's a lot larger than their locales and their aggregate center. And I think from Winchester City and Frederick County's perspective, the Winchester City planning director used to say to me on occasion that Clark County, when the developers come to land there, Clark County says, no, not anywhere. Winchester City says, maybe in Frederick County says, yeah, where do you want to be? And that was kind of his way of explaining the politics of the different communities and how accommodating they were to growth and otherwise. And to some extent, it's true from our perspective. Frederick County is more of a yes, but where and why and how are you going to do it? And so,
and then how long is it going to take?
Yeah, how long is it going to take?
Touch on that, because just give our listeners a perspective of how long of a process does it go through from the idea, the initial conception of this is something that we need to do, to
like,
then
how about
seeing
even
it.
like as an example, Crossover Boulevard?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, most people now know that road, and it's been in the talks for years.
So define it. So just give us the
Crossover
description.
Boulevard is over there on Tevis, so off of Pleasant Valley Road. Well, it used to be, turn on to Tevis, and then you guys did a whole bunch of stuff right there, which looks really great. A little crazy for a while, but looks great now. And you can cross over from like Chuck E. Cheese, Target, that whole area directly over to 522, right by Costco, and the Airport Road actually comes out, goes straight into Airport Road.
Yep. So walk us through
beautiful.
that process.
I'll begin first by turning it over
It was
to
before
John.
your time, right?
Well before my time, but you mentioned it as an example, and I would say it's not the best example because it has a long and sordid history. And go ahead, John.
No, not at all. And I think one reason, one thing to point to with it is it does show how developments sort of can lead many lives. And a lot of times, for example, when you're on the Facebook or whatever, you'll see people comment, "Well, they're approving all these units," and they're talking about units that were approved 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Snowden Bridge is really a fantastic example. I think it was approved in 2003. They're going gangbusters now.
Finally.
That was, Old Dominion Greens was like that too. It sat
right.
there for many, many years, just with the roads.
So as hard as you work to, polish that crystal ball and say, well, this is how you offset your impacts. This is what you need to be proffering for transportation or public services or whatever it may be. That's really tough. I mean, you're talking a generation. I think a generation is considered to be about 20 years,
Sure.
and that's you do your best with it. But then when things start to get crazy, that's usually what you're going back to, old approvals. And it's not necessarily even the fault of the people that did the approving. You did your best with it at that time.
Yeah.
Crossover Boulevard is not a terrible example of that. You had a rezoning that was done, mix of commercial and business that was proffering to do a CDA or Community Development Authority, and that's what they were going to use to build that road, to build that connection over into Winchester. And now that's up, it's been great. It's a very useful road. And but that lived many lives before it came to be. As that CDA failed, that development failed, that development ended up getting sold on the courthouse steps.
Wow.
It went through the recession, it went through everything, and then it actually ended up getting bought back by the folks who had sold the bonds to the CDA because they saw that as their only way to sort of recoup and try and come back out of it whole. But even now, that company's been sold twice since our relationship with them began. So once again, that example of the many lives of development. And after they had bought it, they went through a further rezoning to sort of try and clean everything up, if you will. And that's how we ended up with an agreement with them where they were providing matching dollars to go against state dollars that the county applied for. They're called revenue sharing dollars. And basically, that's how the road was built.
So the initial conception of doing that is to alleviate traffic. It's all about transportation flow as well. Yeah. But then you have landowners, you have business owners, you have these other investors who are looking to profit from this growth. And you guys, I'm not telling you, but I'm asking, how do you navigate that as a county when you're working with all these other partners and people out there who have different motivations? Where do you guys step in, especially for a road like this? We're all like, yay, it's working. It's amazing. We should have been doing this years ago. And behind the scenes, you're seeing a lot of this difficult situations.
Yeah, and on a project like this, really, and like I said, it's been through a couple of rezones, it's been through many owners. You're looking in terms of local involvement or county involvement in the actual project. You're looking for the sweet spot. And by sweet spot, I mean we're not going in and building residential developers, local streets to get to houses and stuff. We're building the roads that were on the comprehensive plan that are good for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what we did there. You don't see subdivision streets that have been built. There's going to be more roads off of there as they actually commercially and residentially develop. But we teamed up with them and we built the road that was good for everybody. So even though you don't see a single unit built out there yet, whether it be residential or commercial, everybody's benefiting from that road today. The portion of Snowden Bridge Boulevard that we built is a perfect example of that as well. Once again, we partnered with them, built a road. Now you do see development there, but you also see a road that's getting used every day and is likely going to help that full connection of Snowden Bridge Boulevard from Martinsburg Pike all the way around to Old Charlestown Road.
So to clarify, that's not the county that's holding up that. That's you guys did your part to create the opportunity, and then it's the Snowden Bridge development to make the connections of those roads.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, when we are getting involved, that's why you're trying to create those situations where everybody benefits. And I know not everybody's happy about maybe seeing a new warehouse go up or a new residential subdivision or whatever, but unless, because these are existing transportation needs, these aren't things that we're just it's not a build it and they will come scenario.
Yeah.
These are existing needs. So it's a situation where we're partnering with these folks to get something that's good for them, but also good for the community as a whole.
So let's talk about, Megan, your sweet spot. Stephen City.
Yeah. I live in Wakeland Manor. So that's why Warrior, and I've seen the plan, it's been forever ago, but to see where Warrior Drive, of course, goes from Sharando currently into Wakeland Manor, and it just stops at a pile of dirt. And I know that there's a plan for it to go many other places in Stephen City. And now that we've got 277 cleared up, open, running smoothly.
It's looking good, by the way.
It's fantastic because that was frustrating for many years. Oh, and Ayler Road, too, is finally, that's all straightened out. So what's happening with Warrior?
So Warrior, right now, this second today, not a lot.
I figure.
Okay. However, in the planning, Warrior Drive is supposed to continue south past Sharando High School and tie into South Frederick Parkway, and which in turn ties into an eventual exit 307 relocation. Somewhat, hopefully more imminently to the north, Warrior will continue north from Wakeland Manor up to where Route 37 is supposed to be extended from exit 310 over to 522. We see, at least anecdotally, we see that connection, or those two connections, if you will, as being really critical and frankly life-changing for a lot of folks in Stephen City. Now, Wakeland Manor residents may not love it because the piece of Warrior Drive that right now basically just serves their subdivision would then become open to a lot of people.
Right. Same thing with like Canner Estates, the new portion of Canner. Right. And I would tell people, even when they were looking to build houses back there, I'm like, nobody's telling you this, but there will eventually, it could be again, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years, there will be, should be a road going back through here. So I know that's going to go back behind those homes in the back of Canner.
So I'd see that as certainly should be the next piece of Warrior Drive, but also the most likely next piece of Warrior Drive.
So if you had to, let's just say in 5-year increments, because I know you can't be like, oh yeah, it'll be next year. If you or is 10-year more realistic? Like, what would the time frame be that you think that they would do anything? And nobody's holding you to this statement. Just
well, and you bring up an important point, because when we're talking about transportation dollars, if we had the money today, then you're talking 5 years to see it. We neither have the money nor a strong expectation of gonna have the money anytime soon.
So then,
it makes those predictions incredibly hard to make.
Is it from the state?
That's a good question. Where does the money come from?
Typically, it comes from the state via their Smart Scale program, where we apply for funds. But we also it also comes from development, and that's where that whole trade-off that we sort of referenced earlier. When development's coming in, it tends to be one of your fastest ways to get something in place, especially if they actually have imminent development happening. But state and we're also looking hard at trying to bring, haven't had so far, but trying to bring in some federal money. Now, that's a whole other trade-off when you federalize a project, but yeah, we're looking for those resources.
And new this year, the board is committing local tax dollars to match our state transportation grants for the first time in a long time, to the tune of $8 million. And that makes us way more competitive than I think we've ever been on that.
Thanks,
on
Frederick
that front.
County.
Yeah. And Warrior specifically is really complex because, as John mentioned, it is kind of contingent upon development, and that next leg of Warrior goes across two very big rezoned pieces of property known as the Archer project and the Cross Point project. And so until they turn on, and start building, Warrior is not going to move any further north from its current terminus because they proffered to build it as part of the conditions for receiving the approval to build their projects.
Now, both of you have mentioned proffered a couple times now. Now, I know what it is only because I mentioned when we were talking just briefly before, I had a client that was building a hotel. They ended up I sold the piece of land that was next to it actually Sansa. It was a Gateway Plaza, that big piece of land that had 2 elevator shafts for many years.
That's right. Yeah.
I sold that piece of land, but before they decided on that, they were looking right there off of the exit of 37, where there's usually a Sheetz billboard right there in that area. And I know that I can't remember exactly what it was. This was like 2007, but it was a large portion of that land had to be proffered with the purchase of it. So explain just to our listeners what proffer is.
Yeah, proffers are, in very short and simple terms, voluntary agreements put forth by developers that they can in turn receive rezoning approvals for. So we call them conditional rezonings, and proffers are the conditions. So they agree to do a number of things, whether it's phase their development or restrict the number or types of uses that they can have. There's cash proffers where they contribute monies to offset the impacts to schools, fire and rescue, and other items. They can look a lot of different ways, but all they are is voluntary contributions offered by the developers to try to offset their impacts for the project that they're proposing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So John, you were mentioning like exit relocations. You're mentioning bigger picture things for Warrior Drive and how it syncs up with the other big pictures, like Route 37 potentially on the east side of town. I don't think we can get into all the weeds of all these things, but for the listeners who are like, well, you're not talking about my town yet. You're not talking about my neighborhood. What impacts me? Where can people go to learn more details? And maybe Wyatt, this is a question for you too, but I'm looking at a website now. So walk me through, because you guys have like a little brag book going on. I love it, of like recent projects and pictures of it. So where can people go to get the dirt on what's going on for their area?
And if they go to our planning website, they'll see where our staff has done a great job recently updating some of our story maps that say not only kind of what the recent achievements are, the intersection of Independence and Route 50 where the signal went in cooperation with Navy Federal, Crossover Boulevard obviously is on there, a number of other projects, but also what's upcoming. If they keep looking, they're also going to find out about some efforts that we've got going on right now, such as the updated Northeast Land Use Plan, which is a big deal for us, and the soon-to-come Transportation Forum on November 10th. So, yeah, if you go to fcva.us and navigate from there to the planning department, there are a lot of resources. And, frankly, if you don't find them, what you're also going to find is ways to contact us. And we are literally there for that.
Really?
So, if you've got something you're not finding, something you don't know, that's what we're there for. That's a big part of our job. That's a big part of why we like to do what we do, is because it's about closing those information connections to make sure people are getting what they need as they make their decisions.
Yeah, so
I can even
not
speak
totally
from
hiding.
Experience that when I've called, and back when I was going through all of this and several other things since then, anytime that I've called, whoever you speak to is so helpful. And then if they need to show you something or you need to visually see it, you can come in, they'll meet with you, they'll show you the footprints, whatever it might be that you're looking at, red lines, whatever those
8 to
are.
5, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
We're there to answer the
Extremely
phones
helpful.
and try to help out.
No, I agree. I mean, my anecdote of the day is, John, I called you like a year ago because there was a house that was for sale that I ended up buying to renovate. And the original listing agent put on it as she thought a disclosure that it's going to be in the middle of this Route 37 project. She was from Northern Virginia. She didn't know, really, but I guess somebody told her that, and she felt obligated to disclose it, so the house just sat there. I picked it up, and after a conversation with you, just kind of feeling out, what does this really mean? I'm like, this is nothing to disclose. This is nothing that's any kind of urgent information. And it ended up working out, and the people who bought it from me love it. And it just, so there's no reason for realtors or other people to scare people off about upcoming projects. Just go straight to the source. Give you guys a call.
No,
and to that end, there's another portion of our page that's really relevant that we would love for people to be aware of, and that's our current planning projects page. And that has a full listing of all the applications we've received for private development proposals to develop land. And I know we've talked a lot about our, transportation projects and our public projects, but one of the things that I think residents will tell you that they can either have their lives upended most often with is private development projects. When they receive an adjoiner notice in the mail and said the person behind you is rezoning their property and they want to do this, that, or the other, that's when we typically get the most involvement from people. And so, I'd love to plug that page. And then John briefly mentioned the Northeast Land Use Plan update. We had some recent awesomely attended meetings up in the Northeast Land Use Plan for updating that. It's a small area plan that's an appendix of our comprehensive plan, and it is basically our blueprint for how we envision that corridor to develop from Winchester City all the way to the West Virginia line along I-81 on both the east and west sides. And when our Board of Supervisors receive those planning development applications, they use that comprehensive plan as a guideline for figuring out if it's appropriate or not. So it's a really important initiative that we want people to be involved in and tell us how they envision their community to build out in the future.
That's great. It's neat to see that it's an open book. I mean, like you're saying, applications are in there, and you can look, and you can get in the weeds, really kind of
there's
learning
plenty
information
on there.
about stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, that's a great page, and we try to view everything as being public information and trying to put it out there.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And that's a big focus of what we try and do is make sure that people know what's out there, but also how they can be involved. And as you page through different developments on the site, you'll be able to see where there are opportunities, whether to come out because there's public hearing or submit comment. There's just so many ways to become involved, because even on our ongoing planning, public input is not only a required, but just a critical piece of our efforts.
Yeah, that's great. It's neat to have you guys to voice that to us right now, because again, out of sight, out of mind, sometimes you don't think that you're accessible. So that's great. Well, here at Iconic Talk, we like to ask our guests 5 iconic questions. No pressure. First thing that comes off the top of your head, and I'll look at both of you guys, and you can just give your answers as they come. So first question is this: what's one of your favorite restaurants in town?
You go first. He's been here longer.
Gosh, downtown.
It could be anywhere in Winchester,
Anywhere
Frederick County.
Most recent great restaurant experience was Taqueria Guadalajara.
Yes.
I should have gone first.
Oh, see, you can join
say it. You can
one.
say it too, because I'm right there with you.
I haven't been there in a while. I need to go back.
Oh, they're
and
so
in a
good.
town where we've got a lot of great resources in that genre, they take the cake.
Yep.
Yes, they
I'm
do.
with you.
Since he said that one, I'll modify it to Everest in Gateway.
Oh,
the Indian
nice.
place. It's
Yeah.
really good.
Oh, really?
That's somewhat
Okay.
new. That's a newer one, I think. I feel like that it hasn't been there that long.
I haven't heard of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Check
it's
that
great.
out.
I don't
Cool.
think I might have to.
Question 2.
All right. What is something that you love about your neighborhood?
My neighborhood is not a neighborhood, so
So
I'm surrounded
therefore
by
you love
like
it.
10 acres and horses and stuff like that.
Nice.
So that's kind of what I love about
Yep.
it. Is it's a good representation of rural Frederick County.
Yep. Nice.
Well, I live in the city,
Yeah.
and I just moved, so I might have to give 2 answers. I used to live on Morningside Drive up near the bowling alley. And what I loved at Mark, you may not remember, you sold me that house.
I remember that a long time ago. Yeah. Yep.
But what I loved about that neighborhood was how it was what new urbanism, in terms of planning buzzwords, it was what new urbanism tries to be. The homes are up near to the street with front porches, all brick construction, great thing. I now live in the West Ribs subdivision on a cul-de-sac, so I've gone away from new urbanism a little bit. But I've definitely, I love how many people we already know over there, and just how nice and quiet the neighborhood is.
Yep. Cool. So third question: why is the area Winchester, Frederick County such a great place to live?
Only been here a year and a half.
Trick question.
Yeah, but I think that it has everything that I want and more, and is able to access anything that it doesn't have immediately. So great outdoor rec opportunities, wonderful people, plenty of options from retail dining and otherwise, and really a good small town community feel, which is what I hear people reference the most.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree from a location standpoint, but also just from a community standpoint. I mentioned earlier I moved a lot growing up. I went to something like 11 total schools, 7 high schools. So stability and community was very important to me with my own family, not wanting to change schools and that sort of thing. So we've definitely found that true community feeling here. And it doesn't seem to matter if you live in the city or the county. You know, like everybody knows each other. So many of them have grown up with each other. They've been welcoming since day one. You know, it's and back to the locations. You can see I can be in 5.5 hours. I can be in a Broadway play, you know, or I can be the beach in pretty short order. And obviously DC, you know, is right there. So it's just great in so many ways.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good point. There is no rivalry between Frederick County and the city of Winchester unless it's a high school game that you're going to.
Well, yeah, you got to leave those things alone once James Wynn and Hanley take the field.
But beyond that, you know, there's not much really. It's very collaborative and cohesive as a community.
Yeah. And where do you go to meet your friends and hang out in the area in Winchester or Frederick County, the county area? Where do you like to go and hang out or meet people?
I frequent a couple different spots along the walking mall, but I would just reference the pedestrian mall as a whole would be what I would say.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't do a lot of that. We are very active. We have 5 children. A lot of activities. It seems like I always am running into my friends on the sides of the soccer field or the wrestling mat or wherever we may be that day or weekend, chasing one of our children in their activities.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm with you. Well, last and final, 5th question. What do you think is one of Winchester's hidden gems? What do you think is around here that you've found, maybe Wyatt, you recently, they're like, wow, I didn't really know that was around here? And John, you can answer the question too.
Go first, I'm thinking.
It can literally be anything.
I don't know if I want to tell because it's
be lines out the door until everybody hears the podcast. Yeah.
I really enjoy our natural spaces, whether it be 3rd Winchester Battlefield, whether it be the trail up off of Jones Road that I'm completely forgetting the name of now. It's fairly new.
Rose Hill.
Rose Hill, yes. I really enjoy the Abrams Creek Trail. Things like that. I really enjoy.
Yeah. I would add on to that the uses in our rural areas that people like to frequent, especially this time of the year, whether it be West Oaks Farm Market or Winchester Cider Works or any of those great operations that we've seen popping up over time that kind of fall into that agritourism activities.
That's all somewhat recent too. I mean, at least for our time, the last, John, 17 years, mine 20 years, Megan, same thing. I mean,
30,
yes,
whatever.
You've been around forever.
Most of my life.
Who's counting?
But they are but they're popping up, and I love it. So that adds to the appeal to the area. Well, guys, thanks for being here. It was amazing. I think that you just gave us a little bit of nuggets of information that we can pass on and just tell our neighbors, but you gave us the resource. What was that website again that we can look at?
www.fcva.us.
There
and
you
then
go.
you can navigate to anything there from the county perspective. Our website's obviously the best as a department.
Of course it
but
is.
there's plenty of
Of
other
course it is.
ones you can find a rabbit
They can
hole
find
on,
you guys
so.
too. Reach out, phone,
Find their
email.
number, give them a call,
There
send
you
them an
go.
email if you have any questions about what's going on in the county.
Thanks,
Before
guys.
you buy your house.
Yes.
Yes. Not
Exactly.
after. Please don't call after.
Call us first,
Yeah.
and then we can
Yep.
get you the information.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Thanks. That was fun and a world of knowledge and information.
Oh, I agree. I kind of geek out a little bit when it comes to planning and zoning. I don't know why. I think it is just totally fascinating. And I mentioned to them when I first met them that if I was to do something different and it's a career, I would totally want to work in planning. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I would
wow.
totally work in planning and zoning. I just really find it fascinating.
I just find it fascinating that people find it fascinating. How about that? I mean, because part of it is where it's so detail oriented, my eyes will glaze over. And I'm glad that there's people in the world that exist that can have that kind of level of detail and forethought and vision. I'm a visionary for the most part. I mean, if you get me into the weeds of details, I'll I'm not going to cut corners, but I'm not going to hit every corner. My wife gets after me about that. She has a different level of detail than I do. But it's excited to see that there's people who are thinking through these things, who are in the weeds of day in, day out stuff to make our county and town and community better.
Well, I think having the comprehensive plan to be able to see, I'm very visual.
Yep.
I'm a visual learner. So being able to see it and see where things are going to potentially go.
Yeah.
And, obviously timeframes are they're always questionable. Like they mentioned before, it's going to depend on funding and where the funding comes from and, what kind of deals basically can made, which I thought that was really kind of cool too.
Yeah. Well, talking about geeking out, I mean, you can go to their website and you can get dirt on anything that's happening. It's all out there.
I will probably go down the rabbit hole later on this afternoon and spend a couple
just start clicking on each of the rezoning
projects
and applications out there, and it might be in your neck of the woods.
Yep.
So
just totally fascinating. And they did such a great job. It was really nice talking with both of them. I appreciate them both being here.
No, we're excited to have more people on like that down the road from the county and from the city to really talk about, basically why Winchester's a great town, but what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
So be on the lookout for more conversations with that down the road. Well, what is happening in our area in the upcoming weeks or days to come even?
And I'm sure a lot of people know that this is coming because it's really big in our area, but the Kiwanis Pancake Day is this weekend. So that's going to be on Saturday from 7 to 5 at Jim Barnett War Memorial Building. We've also got the Battlefield Half Marathon and Relays. That is Saturday also at the Kernstown Battlefield. That's going to benefit Watts, the temporary shelter for homeless in our area for the winter.
Yep.
There's also a fall cash party that's going to be at the Gainsborough Volunteer Fire and Rescue. That'll be November 5th at 6 p.m.
Everything's coming up.
Yeah, and if you like pancakes, you can have them again at the Boyce Volunteer Fire Company. That's on Saturday.
Take your pick.
Yep, November 5th from 7 to noon on Greenway Avenue in Boyce.
Go from one and then go to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's every weekend. There's like at least a handful of things that are amazing opportunities to go out. So enjoy the weather, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the fun. And thanks for joining us on this episode of Iconic Talk. We really hope you learned something from today's episode. And like we said, we look forward to sharing more with you next week. So remember, when you're looking for a real estate professional, make sure they're experienced, innovative, personal, dedicated, and available.
We appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us. And if you have a moment, we'd love it if you'd leave us a rating and review. And if you're enjoying listening, take a moment to subscribe or share this podcast with your friends.
Yep. And once again, thanks to our editor extraordinaire, Cindy Battaglia. Until next time, think iconic.